Hey, we are here for another episode of Spitting and Chatting, where we basically are trying to just, chat it up about things going on in our world, things that we've experienced, and hopefully we can help somebody.
Right.
Whoever's willing to listen, but basically we're going to be talking about a lot of things men experience, from our experience. We're not professionals, so don't be hitting us up in the chat, asking for degrees, and we're not no psychologists. We none of that. But we just two friends that's known each other since junior high, and we got a lot of experience, and we just want to share. So that's where the whole spitting comes in, as just trying to give some game to somebody that can listen and possibly learn from things, our mistakes, or just things that we've learned along the way. And the chatting part is we just enjoy chatting with each other, just being able to get things out. Just to kind of recap from last week, we had a great talk about mental health.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get started, please go ahead and make sure you find that like and subscribe button.
Yep.
Push that, and we about to get into it. I know you hear that all the time, so let's get into it. Before we get started, Lane, you need to share anything? Drop any quick nuggets on anything?
Nah, we good. I'm ready to get going and talk about this because this is a pretty serious issue for me. And I know a lot of people have been talking about it, especially since like George Floyd, the death of him, why fathers are important to a child's life.
Yes.
Very, very, very important. Since his passing, the whole country has been on this whole fathers are important, and not just black fathers, all fathers.
Yeah.
And realizing their importance to a child's upbringing. I know growing up, my birth father, he was in and out there sometimes, and sometimes he wasn't, but I had a solid father figure. And not just my grandfather, but my uncles, and man, they stayed on my neck. I didn't have too much wiggle room to goof off, but that helped me just kind of, I knew where I had to stay in line, and it made me just kind of second guess myself in case I was trying to do something, off the wall or anything.
Yeah, man, I hear you with that. This topic is kind of loaded, and I was writing down my notes and things like that. I know we kind of agreed to maybe title this "The Father Outside."
Really?
So, the father outside what? Outside the house,
Really?
and what that's like when you're growing up as a young boy trying to find your way in this world without a father figure that's there inside the home.
Right.
So one of my first bullet points that kind of came to mind was really how the absence of my father in the home at a young age, it hurt, it was devastating.
Right.
Looking back, not to have an example inside the home. Now there's other details I'm gonna go into later on what I found out, his side of the story and things like that. But, when you think about not having your father inside of the house to just guide you. Um, for the first really 11 years of my life, I really didn't know my dad.
Really?
I was living with my mom. They were separated, and so I only had one view. I only had kind of one outlook, and it really created like a sense of bitterness, like, and just internal anger towards my father, and I didn't even know him. I just knew my mom's pain. You know what I mean? And things that she would share on what she experienced. So that's the only view I had. So initially it kind of just created like a view of confusion, feelings of resentment. So even when he would try to reach out, it's kind of like I was already shut down because I'm like, where you been at? It's just me and my mom trying to make it. So yeah, just to kind of start off, I just wanted to kind of hit on that, like, just full transparency. Looking back, when you're in it and you're young, you don't really know what your feelings are. You're trying to figure things out. But when I look back, my initial like thoughts and feelings is just like I had resentment towards someone I really didn't even know.
Right.
So I don't know what your experience or thoughts were on that.
I had the same kind of feelings with my dad. I grew up the first 10 years, 10, 11 years of my life in the housing projects. And my cousins, their dad used to pick them up on the weekends. And I'd be the only kid left back looking like, man, sure it's nice to get picked up on the weekends and go spend time with your dad and everything. And I've learned to be by myself. You know, I used to play games with myself, throw the ball up against the wall, throwing the football in the air to myself,
Right.
playing basketball by myself.
Right.
And then when my cousins would come back, then, hey, you know, I played with them. But, man, I really wish I would have had that time. I needed it, especially like going into like high school. I noticed like kids with fathers, man, like their dads were involved in the sports. I remember one kid, his dad used to come up there and give like breakfast to all the football players and stuff. And I used to see a lot of the kids' dads up in the stands, you know, praising them and giving them, you know, they were hard on them, and that's what dads do. But man, it developed like a little jealous of me. I used to get jealous of that and mad, like, man, my grandfather would be there, but you know, he had some years on him, you know, he couldn't come to everything, but when he was there, even his presence gave me confidence. I remember he used to come to the gym up at the Crenshaw YMCA where we used to play, and just having him there, man, I felt like, you know, like, man, this is it. Like, my granddad's here. I didn't even know if my mom was there or not, but I had that father figure there.
Right. Right.
What a lot of dads don't know is being present gives that kid confidence. You don't got to do much. But just being present gives a kid confidence. But, you know, I think back about this, you know, and I don't know if you're thinking, like, had I had my dad through those years to be more present, difference would that have made? How different would my life have turned out? And, you know, I think, like, man, if I would have had him, you know, I could have got advice for this, for that. You know, can't cry over spilled milk. It is what it is. But I don't know if you think those kind of things either.
Oh, man. Yeah, for sure. And that's why I'm glad we're talking about it. And I'm sure it's a lot of people that just don't talk about it, but it comes out in different ways. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, as I look back, it was a struggle, you know, because with my mom's situation and whatever their relationship was obviously toxic, you know, and it was almost like she was trying to hide me from him. We would move like from different places. I'm like, what, you know, as a kid, you're like, what are we doing? Like, are we on a run? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on? But she's trying to protect herself the best way she could. She's trying to protect me. All that's creating like just uncertainty, like these identity issues, like me not knowing who I really am because I don't have this relationship with my father, creating resentment. And like you said, you're missing out on stuff like simply like, you know, organized sports and being supported, you know, by your father, or just like life lessons, you know. And so my situation, I felt like I got a distorted kind of lens because like the first 11 years that I had my mom, she was like everything to me. She was, you know, she was the love of my life, put it like that. You know, that was my mom. But when she passed away, that's when my dad at that moment had the opportunity, you know, to go through the legal system and then, you know, basically get me in his custody.
Right.
But at that point, I'm like bitter. Like, I don't know you, or I don't want to live with you. But what other option do I have? You know, I'm going to go into a foster home, you know, or, you know, what am I going to do at that point? So I'm already going into a situation like just with a distorted view. And this relationship is just, there's no trust. It's just broke. How did, you know, I had all these questions that I couldn't formulate as a child. What happened between you and my mom? You know, did I do something wrong? You know, like, why wasn't you there for? Why didn't you fight hard enough? You know, so like all those things, you know, playing through my mind as a child, but I couldn't like articulate it. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's a doozy growing up, and you're trying to like navigate, you know, through certain things in life, especially as a teenager. You know.
Yeah,
So,
I can identify with that, man. I know some of the things that, you know, I missed out, you may have missed out a little bit too. My grandfather filled that void. First thing he taught me, one of the things I remember him teaching me was how to shake another man's hand. A lot of people take that for granted. You know, when I shake somebody's hand now, I always think he comes to my mind whenever I meet somebody new for the first time and I give him a shake. I always see my grandfather's face. And him squeezing my hand, and I'm like, ouch, but it taught me a lesson.
Yeah.
about giving another man a firm shape.
Right.
He taught me how to tie a tie.
Right.
That's one of those things that, some men don't even know how to tie ties. It's
Right.
like, man, can you help me out? It's like, man, somebody didn't teach that guy that.
That's true. That's
But
true.
just having that confidence there, I remember I used to sit up in the window and be looking for him. And once I saw him, and I felt just like relaxed. I could be a kid. My grandfather's here. I am protected. I
Right.
don't know if
Right.
you remember the Night Stalker. You remember that?
Yeah, do I? Yeah.
That
That was
in the
crazy
news.
time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And man, I used to be afraid until my grandfather got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once he got there, I was like, oh, because I was
Yeah.
like, oh, the Night Stalker don't want no smoke with my grandfather. That's the
Right.
protector. I'm
Right.
good. Once I saw him, I was like, man, I could go outside, play. My granddad's home.
Right.
And, it was a highlight of my night. I felt good.
Yeah.
But what do you think about like how we grew up? How does that make you a father today? Does that make you a better father, or do you really try to like, hey, I don't want to make the mistakes that were made to me. I'm going to, step up even more.
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And it's like in my mind, it's like I want to be the best father that I can. Right. And I don't want my daughter to experience none of the stuff that I had to experience. But as I'm getting older, I'm learning that there's like things I got to correct from way back then. Just because of, emotional or baggage that like I'm just now becoming aware of that might creep into like, for example, my marriage, and, you don't really kind of know what you got. There's all kind of books on how to raise kids, right? But it's like, every household is different. And, each child is, from what we hear is different. You gotta take care of them and meet them where they're at. So, man, I'm just doing the best that I can as a dad, to love my daughter and give her what I always wanted. And I know I don't have everything together, but just like you said, I think earlier, just being present, is like number one for me, as best as I can be, just to be present, because I know that goes a long way, you don't have to, it don't really got to be a lot of money involved.
Nah.
I mean, it could just be going to get something to eat, like one of her favorite restaurants, cookies, whatever. And I know that's gonna grow. Like she's starting to get into expensive kicks and stuff like that, right? But
right.
But it's really just the time that I see that's more important. So I think my mindset is like I want to be that, but I feel myself like questioning sometimes, because of certain things I didn't have. Like, am I doing this right? Like, who do I even talk to? You know what I mean? Like, I'm a faith-based person, so I do pray, but you still need like the human elders, people that you can reach out to that's done this. And that's why, like, I'm glad we're spitting and chatting, because maybe somebody younger can learn, from what we're experienced,
Yeah. One thing you said, man, that really hit home was about when we first opened up about in the home, out of the home. And you used to wonder why your dad didn't fight for you more. And I know that's a subject that a lot of young men and men, period, I don't care if they're young or old, deal with. Like, okay, the relationship with you and the mom didn't work out. Okay, whatever. Man, that's no excuse not to fight for your kid.
Yeah.
And I know there's some pressing issues on why certain people can't have time with their kids, and that's why you got to fight. Maybe that means, showing up, at the games, at the school, just to show your face. Maybe that means you got to get into some legal things going on to get that time with your kid.
Right.
That little bit you fight for, man, goes a long way to that kid.
Yeah.
It's important to fight for that time. Yeah, the relationship didn't work out. It happens. Or the marriage, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
With my older boys, man, I was always there. I never let anything that happened in the past affect my relationship with them. I did over and beyond what was required of me. I was at every football game. I met every coach. I was at the PTA, the back to school night.
Yeah.
School clothes, all that stuff. I was present. So I don't have any regrets as far as being present. Did I always handle every situation right? No, because, hey, I had to learn some things too by myself. But I know in our community alone, this is a huge thing that people talk about. And it's a sensitive topic, I know, but you hear a lot of people praising single parenthood
Right.
and talking about that like, you're raising a child on your own. In some situations, hey, you got to do what you got to do. But
Right.
hey, are you trying to get that kid to have the close relationship with their father?
Right.
Instead of pushing that single parent narrative that our community does,
Mhm.
make sure that kid has a close relationship with their father. I don't care where he is. There's no
Right.
excuse.
Right. Right. And that's a great point. Like you said, man, I think if we can just put anything out there, like you said, fight for your kids, you know what I mean? And even if that just means they know that you did everything that you could,
Right.
to
Right.
to show that you were there, to show that you were trying. Because I know there is certain systems that are in place that can be hard,
Yeah.
for in our case, it can be hard for fathers if there's legal boundaries and things that have been put in place, and now there's another person in the picture and all these
Yeah.
different there's a lot of complications that can come with
Yeah.
that. So I get that there can be boundaries, but for the sake of the child, I know for me, it would have been important to see my dad popping up, just saying, "Hey, I'm here, regardless of what you've been told. I just want you to know I love you. We're gonna get our chance. We're gonna get our time at some point." I think that would have helped.
Right.
Now again, he did have some restraints, and he did have some issues because we were moving, like almost like me not really knowing until I got older
Right.
why we were moving. But so to his credit and to my dad's honor, who's not here anymore, I finally got his side of the story too, like 6 months before he passed away.
Right.
And I'm so glad it took me from the age of 11 to 32 years old to finally get the cojones to ask him, like, specifically, like, what happened, what was the issue? And he explained his side of the story, and it was completely different, from what my mom told me. So of
Right.
course, and that's relationships. I
Right.
mean, we experienced that in our own marriages
Yeah.
where we can have two different views, on the scenario, right, or the situation that happened.
Man.
She may think this story is 100% true, and I got a whole different outlook on what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, me being older, I can see my dad's side now.
Right.
Like, wow, like, so it was so important for me to get that information. I'm so thankful to God that I was able to hear his side of the story, like literally 6 months before he
Right.
passed away, because that just gave me a sense of, like, I guess, kind of like closure. You know what I mean?
Right.
Years later, but it gave
Yeah.
me like closure. Like he was doing what he could to the best of his ability. Could he have fought a little bit more? I'm sure he could have, but to hit to the best of his ability, he was doing what he could.
Right.
So
Right.
I want to circle back with that.
Yeah, that man, I had that same conversation with my father around COVID time, and I
Mm.
remember working. I didn't know kind of where COVID was going to take you.
Yeah.
Hey, am I going to make it out of this as a healthcare worker? I was like, man, let me go kind of, make good peace with people, whoever I need to make it with. And he was the first, only person I thought of, and we sat down and exactly like your situation, like he gave me a different side of the story, but he took responsibility for a lot of things. He said it was him. He didn't blame my mother or anything, but he took responsibility and, he kind of dove into some things that he was going through and I understood it. And, I let it go. Ever since then, I've been good. Like, man, nothing bothers me about that.
Right.
But that helped just having that conversation with him. And I went and did it, like I said, because of COVID and everything. So I was like, man, let me get this stuff off my chest and just talk with him. And, I'm glad I did that. I
Man.
remember one day I was shopping, forgot where I was, and I just got in this conversation. You talk to people while you're in a long line.
Hmm.
And I was having a conversation with this lady who had her kids running around and everything. And we got into the topic of everything that was going around in the country with the protests and everything. And we got on the subject of what is needed in our community, the Black community. And she was Caucasian. And first thing she said, she didn't say program, she didn't say welfare, she didn't say any kind of job help or training. She said the Black community needs fathers.
Wow.
Man, for somebody who's
Yeah.
Caucasian to say that, like, that's impactful.
That
Like,
is, yeah.
how is it they see this, but then
Right.
people in our own community don't?
Right.
You know, how
Right.
is it they see this? And if they see that, man, that's big. And we
That's
have to
huge.
acknowledge that and really look at that. Like, you know, what are the reasons that, you know, fathers aren't there? Hey, some people make some mistakes with who they decide to be with. You know, what's the
Mhm.
saying? Lay down with dogs, you get fleas. You know,
Ooh. Watch out.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is what it is. You maybe with that guy, now he flew the coop and he's wherever. Hey,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just because it's not, you know, the biological one, like you said, now the guy's in the house. Now there's a stepdad. That's still
Yeah.
a father. You know, that's still a father. I'm a stepdad, and you know, I don't even like to use that word step, but you know,
Right.
there's the correct meaning of what people say it is. But
Right.
I have a certain protection over my older daughter. Like I look after her. Hey, are you okay? You're safe. You know, she gets
Right.
to telling me about weirdos and, you know, in high school and in college, and my mind starts wondering like, how am I going
Right.
to deal with this? Because I know she can't, but
Right.
she's looking for me for safety. You know, when they go to prom and when they go on dates, you know, guy comes in, yeah, you got to talk to that guy. Let him know there's a father in this house. So
Yeah.
those games, whatever you thought you were going to do, it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
When a father's present, it makes problems and trouble kind of like, oh yeah, let's not go there. Let's not go to that house.
Yeah. Exactly. Whew, you just brought up a deep topic because now that we are fathers,
Yeah,
we know what to look for.
right.
You know, like you said, weirdos and creepos, and
Yeah,
they start younger and younger,
yeah,
right? And you know, I just think about, and this is part of not having a father in the house that gave me kind of a distorted view, even with girls at a young age. You know what I mean? You know, not treating girls the way they should have been treated.
Mhm.
You know, I'm just going off of hormones. I mean, like most
Yeah,
boys do, but I'm just saying, like, when you have a father that can teach you how to guide you through those things,
right.
and this is just putting this out there, like, I will never forget, like, the time where the father of this young girl that I was with
Mhm.
caught me in his bedroom closet.
Yeah, I remember that story. I remember that.
I thought I was gonna be
I know if you were
unalive.
gonna tell that story. I said, is he gonna
Well,
tell that one?
I ain't put no names out or nothing
Right,
like that.
right,
But what I'm saying is, I thought I was gonna be unalive that day.
right.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's like I'm thinking about myself now as a father. Like if I caught some kid in
Oh,
my
it's a wrap.
bedroom closet,
Wrap. It's a
like I
wrap.
don't even know how I would respond. Like,
It's a wrap.
and he just looked at me in such like just disappointment. He just closed the door. He didn't even say nothing.
Right.
And it just that like always kind of stuck with me. Like now I have a daughter, and now I have to protect her. And I hope some fool like myself at that time doesn't come along and try to do what I was trying to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
man, because like you said, it's just, you know, at that point I just, like I said, I had distorted lens, you
Right.
know. So
Yeah. Man, when there's one's present, because that's as a father, that's your worst fear is not being there when your kids, especially your daughters.
right.
I remember my oldest daughter recently had like a little creepo kind of going. She doesn't even know I did this. I didn't want to get this man in too much trouble, but he needs to know that I know. So I
Mhm.
talked to his football coach because his dad wasn't around. I didn't see his dad and said, hey, this can't go on. You know, talk to him, make him
Yeah.
relax. I understand some guys just don't have any tact. They don't know how to approach girls. And hey, but you got to, that's where dads come in. Hey, you're going to get rejected. You ain't
Yeah.
going to get all of them. You know,
Yep.
you're going to have to learn to take no for an answer.
That's
And
right.
if you don't know that as a man, you're going to have a hard road ahead of you. And
Yeah.
it may take another man to teach you this. But let me ask you this. What do you think, how we always knows how boys are impacted with dads? And, you know, we teach them, hey, fall, get up. And I remember my little boys falling, coming home bleeding. I was like, well, yeah, you're bleeding. What you want me to do? Figure it out. You know,
Right.
well, how do you think our daughters grow up knowing that they had a father? How does that impact them later in life?
You saying if they have a father,
Yeah,
or if
how
they,
does that impact a girl who turns into a woman? How does that impact their life?
you know, as I am learning, right? I believe it's providing them a sense of security, a safe place,
Right.
a sense of what to look for
There you
you
go.
know,
Yep.
in a man. Like, my dad didn't talk to me like that. Why am I going to accept this from you? Or,
Right. Right.
my dad wasn't sitting on the passenger side of the car. Why am I going to get in there with somebody that's, you know what I mean?
Right.
That
Right.
just it doesn't have their own stuff together. So I think it just gives them a benchmark, when they feel protected, they feel loved,
Yeah.
they have an example to kind of look towards, because there's also the other side of that, when they don't have, so basically the father outside, we talking about for us. Well,
Mhm.
imagine two fathers outside when you're
Yeah.
coming together, the man and the woman later in life, and both of the fathers is outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine how that turns out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we, we're learning that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're learning that now.
Yeah.
So what's kind of your thoughts on that?
Man, it's really important, just as you say, how that our presence now will impact them later. And like you said,
Mhm.
though, whoever their significant other will be, hey, like you said, is he gonna pull out my chair? Is he gonna open my door for me? Is he gonna
Mhm.
respect my mother? Is he gonna work like my father did? He should
Right.
always have a job or some way of providing. Or I don't care if you got 2 cents, some of
Yeah.
that go to your children. But how we treat them now, or how present we are now, will impact them later in life. And man, that's just so important. But in our community, it's just not. It gets drowned out by all the other noise and stuff like that. But
It does.
girls who have those fathers, man, they're different. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
reaction towards things are different.
Right.
And we're talking about in certain situations. It's not all the
Right.
time, but man,
Right.
there was no balance in that kid's life. He didn't
Yeah.
learn how to stick up for himself, or she didn't learn how, hey, you don't talk to people that way. Here's how you resolve conflict.
Right.
A lot of that's missing in our community. What do you think?
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. And we see it a lot more, now that we have social medias. I mean,
Yeah.
some of it's comical,
Yeah.
but it's really not, because,
Right.
someone has to, like, that person's really hurting on the inside.
It-
And the people that have to deal with that,
right.
it's like you feel for them too. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I know we joke about this all the time, but I mean, you could be a beautiful person, a beautiful woman, but as soon as you open your mouth, whew, you'd be like, what is wrong with you?
Right. Right. Where did you come from?
Right, right. So it's like those things are becoming more and more like, in this day and age, you just start to see the breakdown more.
Hey.
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think it? Like our grandparents. Like, I got to throw this out there. Like, my grandparents, like, probably like my saving grace in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. You know what I mean? Because yeah, they didn't like each other like all the time.
Yeah. Wow, my grandparents fought
Right.
too.
You know what
Right.
I mean? But at the end of the day, it's like they stayed together for the family. Like,
Right.
you saw like the structure, you know what I mean? They had their home,
Yeah.
they had the family gatherings, like people came over.
Yeah.
They made sure we had the basics. Like, they didn't have like all the, the
Yeah.
dollars all
Yeah.
the time, but they had what we needed all the time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So why do you think now these days it's just getting away from that?
I think it's not even our community's getting away from that. I'll just keep it like that. I
Keep it a
see
buck.
other, communities flourishing a little bit.
Mm,
Their families are, together, and
yeah,
it's never too late. I don't care
true,
how young or how old you are. It's never too late to turn that around.
true.
But it's definitely missing in our community, and it needs to be talked about. We don't talk about it enough because you're afraid of offending somebody, and this person may get upset, and hey, that is what it is. But I remember my grandparents, and we both didn't grow up in super religious households.
Right.
We didn't go to church every Sunday, but
No.
your grandparents, I know my grandparents and my mom and my uncle, we were in line. Like, we didn't step outside the box too far. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't want no smoke, and
Right.
just do what I got to do. But,
Right.
the traditional family may not always line up. It may not always have that. It just is what it is. But your presence is still needed no matter what the
True.
situation is.
True.
But my grandparents were the same way, not super religious. They used to get it cracking and, get to arguing and stuff like that. But they always kept an eye and an ear on me and my cousins. And, growing up in the area we didn't grow up in no bad areas, but,
Right.
you couldn't go to certain areas and stuff. And
Right.
my grandparents and my grandfather would pick me up from the bus stop sometimes,
Hmm.
because they're worried about something happening to me.
Hmm.
A lot of stuff is lost in our community. Everything is focused on, like you said, the outward appearance of stuff and social
Hmm.
media, how you look and everything.
Yep.
I don't want to say lost, but we're headed in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's true. It's sad. And to your point of like the lady that you shared, different background, she was able to point it out, and that's what a lot of other communities do have down,
Right.
is the family, and think about it. How else do you flourish as a community if you don't take care of one another?
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that I've seen in our community is that we're quick to rush our children kind of out the house.
Right.
And back in the day, that wasn't like I guess the custom. It's like you stay here as long as you need to until you're in a place to take care of yourself or you
Right.
get married or whatever it may be. But we're not just sending you out to the wolves to just figure it out. Like,
Nah. Nah.
but we kind of are quick to, in a sense, like, if I've done my time as a parent, it's time for you to get out the house, go get a job. Like, of course, we want them to be able to be sustainable and
Right.
grow and become, good citizens and be able to do for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
But everybody is not at the same like maturity levels. Just when you get 18, you got to go. That's not always the best thing for a person.
Yeah. Nah. It's not, and that's a real problem in our community. And thinking, oh, you're 18, you're on your own, you got to go. Man,
Right.
he no job skills, no education,
Right.
doesn't know how to do a job interview, don't even know how to tie a tie. Remember that?
Can't cook rice.
No. And then he's ready to be on his own? No. I remember my grandparents telling my uncle, telling me, anybody, you going to work or you're going to go to school, you're going to do something.
Yep.
And just having that, knowing, hey, somebody, you're always going to have a job or you're going to be in school
Yeah.
to better yourself.
Yep.
And as
Yeah.
long as you're going in that direction, you should be good. Nobody's laying around. You're not going to have
Right.
the option to lay around.
Right.
Even, I ain't kicking you out, but you're still going to be laying around.
Yeah. Everybody's contributing.
Yeah, that's where that male influence matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said earlier, I was telling you, man, I had a respectful fear of the men around me. My uncle, my father, my grandfather, excuse me. I had a respectful fear of them.
Mhm.
And that's important, especially to a young man. And so, hey, I'm going to be in school doing something always. I'm not just going to be like, I never lay it around. That's never been us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And those are the things that when I did get around my dad and my grandfather, because I ended up living with my grandparents, but my dad was more present, but he drove a public bus. So he
Mm.
worked at nights.
Okay.
But I saw the work ethic that he had,
Right.
that he got up every day, did what he needed to do as far as work. And, he contributed the best way that he could
Yeah.
financially. It might not
Yeah.
have been all the time that I would have wanted, but he gave his time the best way he could at that time.
Yeah.
But seeing my grandfather, he'd be working on cars in the backyard and always working on something on the house. It was like things that I was able to pick up, from him that I didn't have, the 1 to 11-year-old, because I was living with my mom. So there were things I started to pick up a little later, and still wish I would have, been able to get more.
Right.
But,
Right.
but yeah, man, those moments are so crucial, man.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Man, I was thinking about my grandparents and my upbringing. I remember like on the holidays and my grandfather getting out in that grill. And that's what made me love grilling and barbecuing so much, because
Right.
he used to make me, he had a real strong work ethic. And my grandfather worked, I think, up until maybe when he retired, but he went a long time. And I remember every holiday, if it was barbecue, I had to get up with him. Man, prepare this meat, prepare this grill and everything.
Yeah.
There was no break. Ain't no just laying around. You're going to contribute,
Right.
help out. And man,
Right.
I remember that. I remember him, marinating the meat and cutting the ribs and smoking them and putting the sauce on. And that's stuck with me.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, bro, because, there's some people that take things to the extreme, like, I'm sure we'll have another show on this, you know, when it comes to like roles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a later
Yeah.
topic. That's a hot topic too, right? But you know, some people take that to the extreme where like only the woman cooks and
Nah.
but you know, my grandfather and my grandmother, they both like worked in a restaurant and they were like, you know, good cooks and stuff like that. So when they were at home and they're from New Orleans, so they
Right.
had all these good meals. Like he would do
Yeah.
his gumbo and you know his beans and like he had his thing that he would do steaks. And then my grandmother had like all these other different meals, and it just was a perfect kind of blend. Like they had their own things that they were good at, you know, different meals that they would put together. So you know, it's definitely, I would say, just from my perspective, it's ideal when you have both parents, you know, working
absolutely.
together, not like competing against one another, right?
Yeah.
But working together for the benefit of like the home, you know, the family.
And I know, like you said, we'll probably talk about this on the next show, but like you were saying how your grandparents cooked and everything and, you know, eating together as a family, what that does for a child, man, that's,
Man,
you
yeah,
know,
for
and
real.
cooking together, stuff like that, you know, as a family.
Yes.
My grandfather used to get in there and help my grandmother cook. Like she
Yeah.
never did all the cooking.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
took some days off. My grandfather would get in there and fry some fish, make some barbecue or something. But, you know, there were shared responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So man, stay tuned on that.
Yep.
Stay tuned on that topic.
Next show.
We're gonna get to that.
Yeah.
But man, you got any, I know we what about 40 minutes in, you got any other points you wanted to hit on
Man,
this
just,
video?
man, this show is new. We love talking about this stuff. I hope we didn't offend anybody. If you got offended or anything, just kind of really look at what we're saying. And we're not trying to put down anybody, any genders or anything like that. There's been some awesome moms that have done good things for our community and taken care of kids in terrible situations. And you got to do what you got to do. And you should be lifted up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's some dads who need to do better.
Yeah.
And just knowing that, and that's what we're trying to do, get people to do better.
Yeah. Exactly, man. Well, as always, man, I love chatting with you.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully we were able to spit a little game to somebody that just wanted to listen.
Yep.
And basically, until next time, stay tuned.
Yep. See you guys next week.